Tonkotsu? That's a good one. First, you observe the bone.
In my last video, I talked about my issues with combat in Wanted Dead. Originally, I was going to split the review so that the first video would cover gameplay in general, and the second video would cover the plot and characters. But I had way too much to say about combat, and decided to make the first video entirely about that, which means that this video will cover the gameplay outside of combat, as well as the plot and characters. If you haven't seen the first video, which I suggest you should, Wanted Dead is a 2023 character action game developed by Soleil Limited, the studio behind Samurai Jack, Battle Through Time, and comprised of former Ninja Gaiden developers. You play as Lieutenant Hannah Stone, the leader of a special division in the Hong Kong Police Department whose cases usually result in bloodbaths. We'll wrap up the gameplay first so that we can take our time with the plot and characters. Describing the gameplay outside of combat is difficult because it's a hodgepodge of various systems. After a field mission, you get to explore the police station. This part of the game reminds me of Astral Chain, which also had the police station as its hub. In both games, you can freely explore the station and converse with your colleagues.
Ever interrogated a suspect? Oh right, all your suspects are dead.
It's really funny how no one on the force respects your squad. You're not stars from Resident Evil. You're the loose cannon cops that are always one screw up away from losing your badges and getting deported and thrown back into prison.
Lieutenant came to see how the real force works.
Besides getting roasted by every cop in the station, you can play mini-games that you unlock as the story progresses. There are crane games that feature figurines of the game's cast that get updated after every mission. Just like crane games in real life, it's next to impossible to snag a figure, but you can at least tilt the machine to knock the figures around and get a better grip angle. Don't do it too many times though, or the machine will break. You can also go around and collect police reports and character profiles scattered about the station. These collectibles add backstory to the cast and the setting. After every mission, the game introduces a new minigame. There's ramen, karaoke, and a shmup. Ramen and karaoke are effectively rhythm games, and the shmup is self-explanatory. Once you clear the tutorial for each minigame, you can replay them by either finding the respective machine in the police station or at the main menu. There's also a shooting range where you can test your speed, accuracy, or just plink away to your heart's content. So what's the issue with the minigames? There's nothing wrong with any of them per se, but more about how some of them are mandatory to progress in the campaign. If you're playing from a fresh save, you can't opt to skip them, so you either play them out or leave the controller alone to reach the end faster. The shmup is objectively the best minigame because you can just quit at the minigames menu. And the games themselves aren't that good either. There's no positive feedback when you hit a note other than a visual cue indicating whether the input was perfect. Get far enough in ramen, and the minigame introduces a second track, so that you have to keep two inputs in mind, and their timing varies between being at the same time or alternating. It's too much too early on in my opinion. And I can't say for sure, but I feel like karaoke is trying to go for that deliberately cheesy mood you see in Sleeping Dogs, where the characters can't actually stay in tune with the song. It doesn't feel genuine like it would in Yakuza, when you get to the final stretch of the song, and the imagery just goes hard. The shooting range is whatever. I don't put any trigger time into my rifle when I'm on the field, so doing it while standing still inside of a gun range doesn't affect my feelings towards the gunplay. The gameplay outside of combat won't carry the experience, but at the same time, it feels like the devs put these distractions in the game to add more production value, as movie nerds would put it, into the final product. The non-combat gameplay is a symptom of a much larger issue. This game feels like the victim of poor planning. What do I mean by this? If you see my video in the game's combat, you've probably noticed that I show what looks like 4 or 5 different environments. Each of those environments belongs to their own respective mission, which amounts to 5 missions total. That's it. There are only 5 missions in the entire campaign. If you go through a single field mission, it'll take you 30 to 50 minutes, depending on whether you skip cutscenes and avoid doing extra stuff at the police station. Once you beat normal, you unlock Japanese hard mode, which sounds like a riff on European extreme mode from older Metal Gear Solid titles. There is no other content besides the campaign and the minigames. And bear in mind, this game went for $60 on release. Now, I'm not one of those types who rates the value of a game based on the projected length of play in a single session. My favorite game of all time clocks in at 2 to 6 hours, depending on whether you skip cutscenes. But I do think it's important that when you buy a product, it should feel like a complete package. Wanted Dead does not feel like a complete package. How can I tell? Now's a good time to talk about the plot. Usually I don't do full synopses, but talking about this game requires context, so consider this a spoiler warning for the rest of the video. The game starts with our main character locked up in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison. Our protag is given an option: stay locked up indefinitely, or do the government's dirty work.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
Jump to a few years later, and we find Hannah at the local Oh, damn. Anyways, we spent some time in this diner to get acquainted with Hannah and the rest of Zombie Unit. I never brought it up before, but Soleil's publisher is 110 Productions. They have a YouTube channel full of videos promoting their products. Most of those videos focus on Wanted Dead, and they're not all trailers. There's a music video that features a waitress, Cinnamon. It shows a day in her life where she works at the diner in the morning, then goes to the nightclub where you end up later in the campaign, and then goes home to her kids. It's a hell of a lot of work to put into a side character for a game. Here's the thing, you never see her again after this cutscene. Even when the squad comes back to the diner, she doesn't show up or have any speaking part after that. All this work and backstory was put into a character that barely has any screen time. This is going to become a recurring thing about the game. Anyways, the chief of the Hong Kong Police Department contacts Hannah and instructs her to go to Dower Synthetics. A heist went sideways and the police are waiting to storm in. Despite her protests, Hannah and the team go to Dower because they're the company that keeps the police station well funded. This is a cyberpunk dystopia after all. Against orders, Hannah and Zombie Unit storm the building by themselves and tear the place apart. The team splits up, and Hannah and Doc encounter a spider tank.
Jammer's down.
I've got a lock. Firing!
Once the dust settles, the mainland force steps in and holds Zombie Unit at gunpoint. The chief arrives to save their butts, but it's clear that the chief and the leader of this army have history.
See you around.
Before they leave Dower, Herzog shows Hannah that the thieves are stealing cash, which they find weird as paper currency is useless in Hong Kong. Back at the station, the chief chews out Hannah for ordering her men to storm the building, but also warns her that he can protect her from the storm that's brewing. When Hannah leaves the chief's office, she's jump-scared by the police station's quartermaster, Gunsmith. Oh, Gunsmith. Where to begin? I guess the first thing to point out is that Stephanie Houston voices and lends her likeness to Gunsmith. I never talked about this in my video for Solstice, but Miss Houston also voiced both lead characters in that game. I'm glad to see her do more work in the industry besides Quiet, and she seems to have thrown herself into this because she not only voices a character, but provides vocals for some of the soundtrack songs. But remember when I said that Cinnamon was a symptom of a bigger problem in Wanted Dead? Gunsmith is like if Cinnamon metastasized. Where Cinnamon gets a few lines in the early game, Gunsmith ends up being a support character who pilots the Amazon drones that serve as checkpoints in the field missions. She'll always chirp some lines whenever you reach a checkpoint. That doesn't sound so bad, right? But after the first field mission, you end up watching cutscenes of Gunsmith inspecting Hannah's rifle and giving a forensic report on an enemy weapon recovered at Dower. And then you see her rubbing elbows with Hannah and Herzog at the ramen shop. And then she shows up at the diner alongside Herzog. But they didn't come together, and it's important we all know that. And she also has this backstory of being an Olympic athlete who did cooking shows in the game setting, and the publisher's YouTube channel has like a butt ton of episodes where she's doing recipes but really badly, and the production makes no effort to hide the fact that someone else cooks the dishes. And did I forget anything? Oh yeah, she also sings karaoke along with Hannah. Let's go back to Astral Chain for a bit. There's a side character in Astral Chain named Marie. She's a quirky character who is really hell-bent on making sure that the people in the city understand safety by way of the police station's mascot, Lappy. Astral Chain is one of those Platinum titles that gets overlooked. It's Platinum's The Good Dinosaur. But the one thing that stuck out from that game was Marie. She became like a surprise waifu because of her quirkiness. I say this with the utmost respect for Stephanie Houston, but I feel like Gunsmith is a deliberate attempt at making a Marie. We're all supposed to instantly like her because she's quirky and smart and knows who Eleanor Abernathy is.
What the fuck are you talking about? Both of you.
The anthropic principle is a philosophical consideration that any data we collect about the universe is filtered by the fact that in order for it to be observable in the first place, it must be compatible with the conscious and sapient life that observes it.
Oh, and she collects cats, so do you get it? Gunsmith cats? Eh? There's so much screen time featuring Gunsmith, and it's wild to me because none of Hannah's squad mates ever get the same amount of focus in the game. They never develop any further than what you know about them through the early cutscenes. Doc is a cynical alcoholic, Herzog is a coomer, and Cortez is mute, so he signs everything he says. But all three of them seem to be on the same wavelength as Hannah, which is good that she never gets questioned about her leadership skills. But it would be nice to see them do more than just draw gunfire away from Hannah during combat. I'm gonna jump back to Astral Chain again, because that's how the characters develop in that game. You learn some backstory about how they came to be a Neuron, and the relationship to the leader of the unit, which is the player character's father, and then the mission ends with you taming the Rogue Legion as your own. That should have been how Wanted Dead did its character work. Each mission should have paired Hannah up with one of the three members, and during the course of the mission, they make small talk and reveal their history to the player. Instead, we get a meme for a loading screen. Just one meme though. This is another one of those cases where there should have been more of this one thing in the game than what we got. So to get back on track, Zombie Unit goes to the local park to suppress an uprising caused by synthetics, which is the game's term for the Detroit Become Human service robots. They're made by Dower, who've gone out of business in between missions, but we still gotta do their cleanup work, and the stage boss is the resistance leader. Something I do happen to like about the plot is that not a single person in Zombie Unit has a moral dilemma about murking the synthetics.
Just don't give them hell. They might look human, they might act human, they're not. Open fire!
Light him up.
You don't have to do this.
Better be safe than sorry.
Even the Chief doesn't consider them human, which almost feels like a clever middle finger to David Cage himself. These guys know exactly what they are and aren't ashamed about it. After Hannah survives a skirmish with Marcus from Detroit Become Human, the team end up taking his girl for interrogation. She puts it in Hannah's head that Hannah might be a synthetic without realizing it, which is supposed to be impactful because there are moments where Hannah collapses in the station and experiences flashbacks in the form of 2D cutscenes. I hate to keep bringing up other games, but this is the exact same red herring as in Binary Domain. Hannah and the girl do an iRobot bit, and then Hannah recognizes a line she says from an old case, so she sets off to speak with an old contact. Kind of a dick move on Hannah's part to bring Cortez, the only mute member of the team, to a nightclub called the Deaf Panther. At least he's a good sport about it. Like every other mission so far, things go bad, and Hannah and Cortez have to fight their way out of the club and exfil from the rooftop. Along the way, the mainline unit arrives at the scene. The boss for this mission is a sniper with cloaking abilities that I talked about in the combat video. Here's a weird thing about this boss. Her case file says that she was locked up in the same cell as Herzog, and he mentions this over ramen. But they never meet up in the game and acknowledge this because Herzog doesn't arrive at the scene until Hannah beats the boss. Why even have this plot point if it doesn't pay off? The team return to the station and treat Cortez after getting shot by the sniper. Once they get to the station, everyone else is clearing out now that Dower is gone. Zombie Unit escort Gunsmith and a synthetic girl through the station and out to the streets. While her team escapes, Hannah runs into normal-sized Tom Cruise, who is the second in command of the mainland unit. But in a shocking plot twist, it turns out that there are two Tom Cruises. Hannah regroups with her team, fights through the streets, reunites Marcus with his girlfriend, and as they try to exfil, Hannah faces the leader of the mainland unit in a duel. This is where I started thinking that the game was fucking with me.
Hoping to get some kind of info from me. It don't matter what you kill me.
Was that a meta joke? Am I giving this game too much credit again? Anyways, Hannah kills a guy and gets to the chopper. Then the game cuts back to moments before the final level, where the leader of the military unit confronts the chief and kills him. Turns out the chief knew more than what he told Hannah. After the credits, Hannah is seen talking on a phone in a hotel. She's been sending her paycheck to an orphanage to take care of a kid she found while on a case. There's a file in the police station regarding a case involving a domestic disturbance at an apartment complex. Hannah answered the call and found that the husband had murdered his spouse and was about to kill Hannah before she took him down. In the adjacent room, Hannah found their son watching TV to cope with the trauma. She sat with him to watch TV until backup arrived. This flashback was different from the others because it was done in 3D and not as an anime cutscene. I thought this was going to be the start of flashback missions that put more of Hannah's past in the context, but no, it's just a cutscene. After the post-credits, another animated flashback reveals Hannah's real name and the reason for joining Zombie Unit. She's a single mother who can't afford life-saving medication for her son, so she enlists as a mercenary. She's told that she'll be put under and given a false persona that she'll assume during her tour. The flashbacks she's been experiencing throughout the story are her old personality trying to resurface. This is what the red herring about Hannah being a synthetic was supposed to pay off.
These implants of yours, what's the purpose?
Pain, mostly. Masters are not allowed to physically punish the drones, so if a violation occurs, I get zapped. I'm flesh and bones, just like you. Fucking heat, no food and water, hard conditions to survive.
If you've been reading the reports about Zombie Unit, you might notice that every member is charged with the same set of crimes. This implies that none of them are what they appear to be, and they all might be regular civilians like Hannah, but with false memories. The gangster at the nightclub wasn't trafficking synthetics, but humans whose memories were tampered and bodies modified so they would appear synthetic. They were in bed with Dower, who was in bed with the local police, and they all answered to the corpo that hired Hannah to become a Manchurian candidate for some pills. And that's it. That's Wanted Dead's story. Do you understand how empty I felt after beating this?
I get it. Stop the drama, okay?
All that time spent on quirky character engagement could have been used to build a stronger plot that didn't rely on a twist ending. This game is punching way above its weight because it has a plot that's too invested in being mysterious, when it should be just as straightforward as its gameplay. It's not that this isn't the right genre for the story, but the game needs to be longer if it wants a plot to feel fully developed. There's a character who gets teased in trailers and in the early game as someone to be afraid of, but she never returns for the rest of the game. I was expecting her to be the true final boss, but by mission 2, she's a background element at the station. She should have been the missing link between the station and the corpos manipulating everything. And I've been holding it back for a while now, but despite how much I like the environment art in this game, the visuals are super dated. Remember how I said in the combat video that Samurai Jack was visually impressive because it kept the strong art direction of the animated show? Soul could get away with using simple textures in that game because the reference material was a cartoon. It doesn't look so good when you're trying to go for a more realistic style. You know when someone describes a game as having PS2 graphics, that can be taken as a compliment on having a strong art style? Wanted Dead looks like it was made for the PS3. The lighting flattens out the textures on character skins, and the hair needed some more alpha planes for each character. It's most evident with Gunsmith since we can compare her with Quiet from Phantom Pain. I need to stress that we're comparing character models from a game that came out this year with the game that came out in 2015. My biggest issue with Wanted Dead's character models isn't even the texture work, but how it looks like the art team didn't paint any weights on the characters. If you want to animate a character model in a 3D game, you need to attach a rig to that model. But once you attach the rig, you also have to determine what influence each point in the rig has on the model. This is called painting weights. If you do this right, stuff like body armor won't shift around even when your character is moving their arms and shoulders. But if you don't paint any weights, then your body armor will look like it's made out of rubber as it swims all over the character's chest. The low poly models and low res textures would be fine if it weren't for the fact that the cutscenes go for close-ups on models that have no business being shown that close to camera. You can't do glamour shots on a bowl of ramen when it looks like it could have come from Yakuza 3. There's a cutscene in the chief's office where he talks about a revolver he keeps on display, and the camera cuts to a medium shot with the gun in the background. I shouldn't be able to count the vertices on an object in a 3D game that's not going for a retro aesthetic. Actually, scratch that. This game is going for a retro aesthetic, but only in its UI elements. For some reason, the menu font has a blocky look that resembles text in 16-bit games. I don't understand why the UI looks like this. Is the game trying to go for a synthwave feel to dovetail with the cyberpunk premise? Is it cribbing off of No More Hero style? The chainsaw set pieces and obsession with minigames made me think so for the longest time. I hate to keep piling on criticisms, but I also have to bring up the voice work in Wanted Dead. Certain exchanges feel awkward or end way too abruptly in cutscenes.
You got a better plan?
August will help. You won't make it without him.
He gets better every minute.
You don't have to trust me.
Alright, knock it off.
You seem to be very hostile today, Hannah.
Shut the hell up, all of you!
I think I'll have a shake.
What did I do to deserve you?
I don't think the fault lies on the actors, but more on the direction and the editing. Despite English being a second language, Hannah's VA can deliver some good lines in the flashback scenes, or when she's allowed to monologue for a bit.
There's clearly something going on here. I'm not a good detective, you know. I'm an enforcer. They pay me to hold my rifle steady and aim for the head. Make it easy for me. Mustafa Mercer.
Who?
My first case. Maybe second. He's a submarine smuggler. Should have killed him when I had a chance.
I remember the name.
Fast forward this bullshit.
Despite these technical shortcomings, I can't say that the modeling team was asleep at the wheel. There are rooms in this game where you know the art team wanted to show off all the models they made for this title. I'm still in awe that the team made like 8 different flavors for a single brand of chips, and then did that to like 5 different brands of chips. And they're only ever displayed in a single shelf in the concession lobby of the first stage of the game. I only ever see this kind of hyper-focus on assets in Eastern European games. I did notice that later stages got less attention than early stages. The streets needed to have more clutter and dimmer lighting to look more like actual streets, and not like a stage from Fighting Force. I keep forgetting to mention this in all my drafts for the script, but I also like how the HUD moves based on whether Hannah uses her sword or rifle. All of the important info is contained in a small box that stays to the left of Hannah while she's got her katana out, but when she aims down sights, the HUD shifts over to the center of the screen and just under the rifle's crosshair, which is where the player's eyesight would normally fall while firing a gun. I genuinely think that Wanted Dead is a result of poor planning. There's no other explanation for why so many elements of the game feel overdeveloped, yet other elements feel overlooked. There's this concept in film theory concerning auteur directors. Some directors have such distinct styles that they stand out compared to their contemporaries. It's harder to apply that theory to game development, because it's more of a collaborative effort, but there are still certain personalities that stand out. Back when Ninja Gaiden was at its peak, Tomonobu Itagaki was considered an auteur in action games. But when he broke off from Tecmo to make Devil's Third, it was a complete departure from his past works. Once he left the team and it became Soleil, I thought they were finding their own voice with Samurai Jack. But then they made Wanted Dead, and it feels more like Devil's Third than anything the studio's ever done in the past. This project feels like it was someone's baby, like they thought Devil's Third didn't take off commercially because it was stuck on the Wii U, so now it's a perfect chance to do it again. I once said about the Platinum Ninja Turtles game that a studio making a bad game could still work out because it could use the lessons learned from that game to make a better title. Well, Wanted Dead should have been that better title, but it's actually worse because it's missing features that were in Devil's Third. You can't replay individual missions, you can only either play a new game, continue a current game, or start New Game Plus. Even Samurai Jack had chapter select. You see what I mean about this game feeling unfinished?
Oh shit! Detective Stone has a lead. Wake up. This case reeked from the very start.
Despite all this, I still don't hate Wanted Dead, and I'm still interested in seeing what Soleil will make after this title. But I wouldn't recommend getting this game at full price. Wait until it hits $40. Or better yet, get Samurai Jack Battle Through Time, because that game still slaps. Even though I think the graphics are dated, the plot is aimless, and the minigames are mid, I wouldn't have minded the game's shortcomings if the combat was good. All of this should be garnish. But because I can't get into the combat, I gotta scrutinize the graphics, the writing, the minigames, and the cutscenes dedicated to Hannah taking a shower between each mission to explain why she's not covered in blood and wearing a different colored shirt in later missions. You know what was the one thing that kept me going while recording footage for these videos? Once I finished, I could finally wipe Devil's Third from my hard drive. Well, mission accomplished.